as official provisional results of the Liberia presidential election places incumbent George Weah and opponent Joseph Boakai, a former vice president, neck and neck. Liberia seems to be heading for a second round of voting in the presidential election. With more than 98% of ballots counted, Boakai, 78, won about 43.50%, while George Weah, 57, a former international footballer who was running for a second term as president of Liberia, gained 43.8%, according to results published by the National Electoral Commission. The two men were well ahead of the 18 other presidential candidates in the first round of voting, which held on the 10th of October in the country. Joining us now on the morning show to look at the likely runoff polls between Weah and Boakai is Dr. Kester Onor, Senior Research Fellow, Nigerian Institute of International Affairs, and a visiting lecturer at the Institute of Peace, Security, and Development Studies at the Nnamdi Azikiwe University, Awka. I'm told you are a great Zikite, but
of course,
here we are majorly Malabites. But quickly, let's talk about Liberia.
Thank you for having me, Dr.
Yes, thank you. Gap of about 5,346 votes between George Weah and Boakai. This is Boakai's last chance. He's 78. George Weah is a younger person. But who do you think is likely to gain momentum when Liberia goes to the second round again, I guess by November 7th, if there are no appeals that will stall the process? What's your reading of the emerging situation in Liberia?
Thank you, Dr. Ruben. Well, even the latest results, we've gone beyond the results that we've just seen, because the latest result shows that President George Oponwe has scored about 791,661 votes. That is which is about 43.79% of the votes. Yes. And then the former vice president, that is Boakai Joseph, had about 786,205 votes, about 43.49% of the votes. And it shows that none of them have been able to reach the 50% or more than 50% benchmark. Required, for them to at least gain an outright victory. So I believe that in the runoff, well, a lot of things are expected, considering the fact that the opposition have accused the incumbent president of corruption, and that he has equally created excruciating poverty in the land. You understand? But even the secretary to the coalition, that is the coalition for democratic change, which is the ruling party, has equally denied that accusation, saying that at least they have done so much within the past 6 years of this current administration. And George Weah equally said that he has equally given a tuition-free, scholarship to university students. But these are not the only parameter to judge performance. I believe that in the runoff that will be coming up in the 7th of November, that's if there is no litigation, it will equally be highly contested. And I think that the incumbent may narrowly win the election, as we saw in the 2017 election that ended up in runoff election.
Yes, but in that case, George Weah was the beneficiary of that.
Definitely.
Would you say that his popularity at that time, this huge football star, made immense promises to Liberians? Do you think that, obviously his popularity has waned since then, but do you think it's waned to the level where people would be willing to boot him out if, during the runoff elections? And beyond that, on the side, something that's come up is the conduct of the elections itself, which has been praised largely as being quite peaceful. International observers have said said that it was a peaceful election, and there are some lessons perhaps for other African nations to learn from, some of which in terms of the education of the staff members. Of course, Liberia is a much smaller country in terms of numbers, but voter turnout was also said to be very good. The faces and names of candidates on the at the polling stations, just ways to avoid certain issues of election challenges are some of the lessons that we could learn from perhaps Liberia. But your thoughts on as to, are you certain that his popularity would have waned to the extent that people are ready to put the legend George Weah out on November 7? Well,
if you look at the current results, if his popularity has actually waned, he wouldn't have maybe gotten the number of votes he has gotten this time around. And remember that at least there were about 20 contestants. We are now talking about 2 of them because 2 of them are the leading candidates. You understand? So the issue now is that just like they did before, you know that they have to go into coalition with other parties for them to emerge after some trials. So it now depends on any of them who can exercise enough political sagacity, to woo other parties that are having small numbers. So if they can maybe woo other parties to join them and form a government, then it will be kudos to that person. But talking about his popularity, I believe that he's still popular in Liberia. And then talking about the turnout, obviously the number of registered voters in this election, is about 2,471,617. And out of that number, about 77.71% actually participated. That is voting in the election, which shows a very large number of people coming out. Yes. And even the youths that were not born during the civil wars, we saw them this time around coming out, to exercise their franchise. So I believe that the election was peaceful and there was equally high turnout across the country. With although there were little problems, talking about the late, arrival or the late voting in some areas. So if you look at the way things has gone, it's obvious that African countries have a lot to learn. For the first time, we are now seeing somebody who is not actually using his power of incumbency, you understand, to manipulate the situation. You can see the way that even the oppositions agree that the election is free and fair. Even the African Union and the ECOWAS and other international observers, they have equally laid credence to the election. Only that they are now advising the people that none of them should rush, to declare the result, considering the fact that the National Electoral Commission are the only body that has the mandate to declare the rightful winner.
So I'm shocked. I'm at sea. What elections are you talking about? Is it the same Liberian election? And there was massive pre-election violence. Well, that's why I'm shocked when you are saying all of this. I'm like, really?
Definitely.
This same Liberian election, there was massive pre-election violence. In fact, George Weah had been accused of high-handedness. In fact, the number that ended up in the tally, there had been allegations that those numbers all of a sudden were propped up big time in the dying minutes. In fact, when you talked about voter education and awareness, I'm at sea because close to 120,000 invalid votes. And the election chief in Liberia, Madam Davieta, was saying that it was because of poor, people didn't get a grasp of the system properly. That's why you have over that amount of invalid votes that could have tipped the balance of the election. So I'm asking, which elections are we talking about, really?
Well, at least you've expressed your own view, and at least everybody's entitled to his opinion. But yes, going by observers, both international observers and local observers, they believe that the election, was peaceful. And again, there was equally massive turnout. At least we never hear anything about voter suppression or intimidation. There were massive turnout. And going by the number of vote counts, it's obvious.
That's what we had. We had the Minister of, if my memory serves right, Information.
Yes, from Liberia.
From Liberia here. And when we asked him about the pre-election, he talked about, he was trying to defend the government, and we brought to him the allegation. So I'm at sea as regards this election.
I think the pre-election, maybe the incidents that happened during the pre-election or the prelude to the election, I think there were lessons learned. And maybe part of those lessons learned will actually what are the things that has been incorporated into this election, and that is why we are talking about peaceful election here.
Anyway, Doctor, Yaga Africa, was one of those groups of observers. And the Yaga Africa report, preliminary report, states clearly that there was high turnout, that it was peaceful, that the election officials respected the rules and the procedures, and that in any case, this has been the closest presidential race ever since the end of the civil war in Liberia. So, and Yaga Africa deployed observers there. But in any case, that's not the issue. When Liberia goes to the polls on November 7, if that date is sacrosanct, what do you think is likely to happen? Because you refer to the other political parties involved. There are 18 other political parties. Many of those other political parties are anti-war. They accuse him of not putting together a justice, war crimes justice court. They accuse him of not fulfilling his promises. He says he has been paying school fees for students, and he has been paying West African school certificate examination fees, also for students. But they say no. Which political parties do you think is likely to align with, since you are so optimistic that it stands a chance? And each of those 18 other political parties scored up to about 3% of the votes. So where would those percentages come from? From MDF, from ALCOP, from which political parties?
Well, like I said earlier, I said that if Joseph Boakai, if he can exercise enough political sagacity, he should be able to enter into alliance with other political parties to war them, considering the fact that even other political parties are disgruntled, at least accusing him of corruption and maladministration. So if they can come together, then there will be chance for Joseph Boakai. But if he cannot be able to galvanize the opposition together, for them to speak with one voice, and maybe, capitalize on their strong area, then it means that even George Weah can still, win the runoff election.
Well, Boakai says he wants to rescue Liberia.
That was his,
at 78.
That was his.
What does he want to rescue?
That was his political. He said that he says he's coming for rescue. That he want to rescue.
As a vice president.
Yes, that he's coming for rescue. That he want to rescue the fair leadership, at least to bring a sound leadership into the country. Yeah. Well, let's see what in the next 2 weeks. Let's see what people will. How the people will decide.
But let's talk about alliances, because obviously both main parties, at least the two who are going head-to-head, would need to form alliances with the other smaller parties. Are there talks currently, and are there opportunities? Are there agreements made already, or is the body language reading that one party would align with perhaps Boakai or Weah? Because that's the game changer here. Who would stand behind either of them, and what's the strength of that party?
Well, if you look at the configuration of Liberia, and you saw those like the Madingos, the Madingos will likely align with Boakai, but then it depends on what he is offering them, because in such alliance, you have to look at the things at the table, If what he is offering them is enough for them to align with him, why not? But if though, on the other hand, maybe using the power of incumbency can equally woo others and give them incentive, that attractive incentive, then likely they may expand the already existing coalition. But I think that because of the oppositions, I believe that they believe that Doe has not done well in the past 6 years. So I think that if Joseph Boakai make an enormous effort, he can garner the opposition towards his side, depending on what he has to offer them.
Okay, so the question will now be, what would Weah offer? Is it same kind of corruption? Is it like that, like the French will call it tous les mêmes? Is that all the same corruption? Because that's all is offered. If you check the indices, the slums in Liberia have grown bigger. He's not been able to take people out. He's not been able to give those people, the soldiers, the child soldiers and the likes that fought in the war, a proper economic livelihood. He has failed totally. And a lot of people put so much trust in George Opomwe because they felt he understood the feelings of people. He was an ex-footballer. He was a rallying point and a source of inspiration. So is it the same carte blanche of corruption he's going to be able to offer the other parties? That's what a lot of people are saying about Where has been a disappointment.
You know, when we talk about this issue of corruption, it's been alleged that he's corrupt, you know, and one cannot be proven guilty unless the court of law decide otherwise. And then when we are talking about what he has to offer, we know that in politics, you know, is a game of numbers. And again, he can offer them some ministerial slots, you know, depending on that, if he can offer them some ministerial slots, and then they will now go into agreement that maybe in the next election, equally, the party will throw support for their candidate. These are some of the issues that may be on the table, you know. But if we are talking about maladministration, I think it's becoming a general thing, even all over Africa. You know, we're talking about the economy. You see that all over Africa, things has not been in a very good shape. Most of the countries in Africa are having serious economic problems, you know. So it's not only restricted to Liberia. We equally cast our mind back to the period of Helen Sirleaf Johnson. Yeah. You know that she came from United Nations, you know, and the Bretton Woods institution actually supported her massively. You understand what I'm saying? So George Weah coming, you know, from being a sportsman coming into the field of politics, you don't expect him maybe to thrive much the way that Helen Sirleaf Johnson did. You know, considering equally the economy of the country, if you look at the country economy, he is not going to the moon maybe to get resources to alleviate the problem in his country. He has to make do with the things that are available within the country. I'm not saying that he has performed extraordinarily, but at the same time, I think that posterity will judge him maybe after his tenure in office.
Well, on that note, we'd like to thank you very much, Dr. Onor,
thank you very much
for joining us on the morning show.
Thank
Fingers crossed,
yes,
we'll see what happens eventually in Liberia.